This is James Krishnarik here, live on Spreaker Web Radio with another broadcast of Real Steel Sports. It's been a while, really, since I've done some. I've more or less been kind of getting back in my schoolwork. Our school's radio club is in the rebuilding process, and I'm putting a lot of my free time into that. But that's going very well. Me and my fellow radio club mates are doing very well. We're trying to restore it to what it used to be, and it looks like, so far, everything is going to be on schedule. But enough about that. The 2014 NFL Draft will be here soon. Less than 3 months away. Actually, maybe just about 3 months away, I should say, because I forgot that it's in May this year, not April. And there's a lot of controversy going around over who should truly be the #1 overall pick in the draft. Johnny Manziel, Teddy Bridgewater, or Blake Bortles. First, let's start off with a little background on all three of these guys, because all three of these guys are really good players. First, you got Blake Bortles. I mean, what makes Blake Bortles so good is that he is the prototypical NFL quarterback. He's big, he's 6'5", he weighs 230, and he's had a very successful career at Central Florida. And that's not really a school that produces a lot of great players, but Brandon Marshall and Dante Culpepper would be great examples of players who came out of that system and succeeded in the NFL, both of them being Pro Bowlers several years over. Bortles' career numbers at Central Florida, he completed over 65% of his passes for 7,598 yards, 56 touchdowns, and a mere 19 interceptions. So he held onto the ball fairly effectively, he was very accurate, and he could throw the deep ball pretty good. What makes Bortles a very good prospect is his size and the fact that he is very strong in the pocket, and he will be very, very, how should I put this? He'll be very, very effective in the pocket because he won't be, running around, or he won't be more or less playing as scared as Matt Schaub or Case Keenum did last year. And if the Texans do take him #1 overall, which they will probably take a quarterback, I would have to say that he gives them a very good option there. And now, let's move on to the other prospect, Teddy Bridgewater. Bridgewater is very, very underrated. He's 6'3", he was a little over 200. What makes Teddy Bridgewater good is that he's just accurate. He's completed over 68% of his career passes at Louisville for over almost 10,000 yards, 72 touchdowns, and 24 picks. A few more picks than Blake Bortles, but then again, he's throwing the ball a hell of a lot more. He's really throwing the ball down the field, and he can run pretty good. His numbers are not as impressive. He averages less than a yard per carry. But if he has to make a couple plays with his legs for first downs, he'll do it. He's got a strong arm. He's a smart quarterback. And he's big. He's 6'3". That's not small for a quarterback. It's about average size. Ideally, you want between 6'3" and 6'5", because you don't want him to be, a tiny type. But then again, you don't want him to be a statue. But, if anything, Bridgewater's got a lot of potential and a lot of game, and I think he would be a very, very good selection for any team that picks him. If he fits in the right system, I think he could potentially be a Pro Bowl quarterback because he's got all the tools. And now we move on to the third prospect and the most publicized one, and that's Johnny Manziel out of Texas A&M. His Texas A&M career, compared to the other careers of the other guys at Louisville and Central Florida, is not nearly as long, but it's equally as prolific. You look at the 2 years that he had as a quarterback. I mean, the numbers just speak for themselves, how good he really was. Because if you just look at his career numbers, 69% completion percentage for 7,820 yards, 63 touchdowns, 22 picks. Johnny Manziel has all the tools to succeed in the NFL. The only thing that's going to bother teams is the fact that he's officially listed now, thanks to the call line, is 5'11 3/4. But if you look at the way he played some of his games, He fights for every down. He put his body and himself on the line for his teammates because he just wants to win. And the off-the-field stuff, I don't consider that an issue because, let's put it this way, if social media like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and such existed back in the days that Joe Namath played, he'd be subjected to the same stuff that Manziel is. So I don't look at that as an issue. Now that I've analyzed all three quarterbacks, more or less it's kind of a summarizing detail. In my opinion, the player of the three of them, the best quarterback prospect and the guy who I think gives an NFL team the best chance to win, and in my opinion, is not that difficult of a decision. All three of these guys possess incredible skill. All three of these guys can throw. All three of these guys can move fairly effectively. But if I had to pick one of these three quarterbacks to run my football team, there's no doubt I'm choosing Johnny Manziel. And several GMs would probably think that, maybe I should go ahead with Bridgewater or Bortles. They're more sizable, more prototypical pocket passers. They don't have the off-field issues. There's nothing about Manziel that turns me off if I was a GM. That would say, I don't think this guy should be picked because this guy, a lot of people would say that could be his detractors say that he's got off the field issues. He's like Ryan Leaf. He's prolific, but he's off the field. He's a loose cannon. I don't buy into that. I don't buy into that comparison at all. I think that Johnny Manziel has his head on straight. I do. And what really impresses me the most about him is his competitive nature. I mean, Bridgewater and Bortles are getting ready for the combine and the draft. Johnny Manziel's asking Tom Brady about what tips to have going into the NFL. That just goes to show you how much the guy wants to win. I don't think he really cares much about numbers. He just wants to win football games. And that's all you can ask of a guy. And if you look at the games that really made him as a quarterback, the 2012 game between Alabama and Texas A&M, and the game between the Duke Blue Devils and obviously Texas A&M in the Chick-fil-A Bowl this year, those two games made Johnny Manziel, in my opinion. Because, first off, let's start with the Bama game. And what impressive about that game was nobody really knew much about Texas A&M or Johnny Manziel. He comes out against Alabama, and he accounts for over 340 yards of offense against the Crimson Tide. I watched that game, and I was so impressed with the way he handled himself. If you look at the way he played, people question his maturity. In that game, he's a freshman going against a seasoned quarterback and a national winner in A.J. McCarron, and he outplayed him. And you can't say, well, McCarron had an easier... No. Johnny Manziel went into the hornet's nest of Alabama, and he came out victorious as a freshman. That game impressed me more than anything because he's so young, and he's doing it with his legs, with his arms. The player he bobbles the snap and still throws a touchdown pass was really impressive. It's just, he in that game just came of age. And then you look at the game against Duke. I can't think of too many quarterbacks that in a big bowl game would overcome a 21-point deficit at halftime. He was down. The A&M defense was literally getting shredded. And he led that team all the way back with his arm and with his legs, accounting for over 450 yards of offense. Now, you can make a sing argument that Bridgewater and Bortles had in the prolific games. Bridgewater's prolific games, and Bortles, most specifically the one against Baylor in the Fiesta Bowl, but they don't impress me as much as Manziel because I get that they want to win. I get that they want to succeed, and I get that they want to compete. However, I don't feel the same competitive drive from them near as much as I do Manziel. And that's what you want, because let's put it this way. If Manziel doesn't get drafted in the top 2 or 3, it's going to be because of his height, and teams are going to look at that. And that's just pisses me off, because think about it. Manziel's 5'11" and 7/8, or 3/4, whatever. It's the same measurement pretty much. What's like a 1/10 of an inch? Doesn't matter really. But if you look at historical quarterbacks that have succeeded in the NFL and went to Pro Bowls, Drew Brees is a Super Bowl champion and will be in the Hall of Fame. Russell Wilson is a Super Bowl champion, and if he plays well enough for another 4, 5, 6 more years, he could end up in the Hall of Fame. Fran Tarkenton is in the Hall of Fame. And Doug Flutie, if he'd have been given a chance to really play and would have given a team around him and a supporting cast, I think he could have been a Pro Bowler several times over, like 5, 6 times over, and maybe an All-Pro. That's how good he was, but no one ever believed in him. They just looked for some guy who was bigger and more prototypical, and instead, overlooked him, and he proved he could win at every level. None of those guys are more than 6 feet tall. And if you look at the list of big, rifle-armed, tall NFL quarterbacks that flamed out in the NFL, Jeff George, Kyle Bowler, Jamarcus Russell, these are guys that had all the skills in college, that were taller, that were bigger, stronger, faster than all these little guys. And they failed in the NFL. Do you know why? Because it's my theory that as an NFL player, and pretty much in any sport, if you are a little bit undersized, but you're mentally tough, then you've got an extreme advantage over your opponent, because when the chips are down and you need to make a play, mentally, you're tougher and you know you're going to pull through. And the bigger, stronger guys tend to succeed and try to, and more or less go on raw talent and thinking that they know everything. Jamarcus Russell's a great example of that. He thought he knew everything. He thought he was the greatest thing ever. Look what he did in the NFL. And in my opinion, next to Ryan Leaf, the second greatest draft bust in league history. And maybe the second greatest in sports history. But the point is this. You have the pick number 1 overall, Houston. Take Manziel. Because, let's think of it this way. His career at A&M was more successful than guys that are already in the NFL, that played longer in college. His college career was better than Blake Griffin. Oh my gosh, Robert Griffin III's. I gotta stop watching basketball. Andrew Luck's. His college career was better than several players who are prominent passers today. Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson. He's had a better career than all of those guys. And the fact is, he clearly wants to succeed at the next level. I was blown away with how impressive he was at his press conference day at the Combine. He looked like, okay, I know I'm here. I want to win. And I want to be a champion in the NFL. I want to put my teammates' lives on my shoulders so that we can win. That's the kind of attitude you want in your quarterback. Look at Tom Brady. He's a great example of that. And again, Manziel having big hands, I measured his hands, are 9 7/8. They're the biggest hands of any of the quarterbacks in the draft. Bigger than Bortles and bigger than Bridgewater, and that helps. It helps when it comes to, throwing the football in tough weather. Now let's look real quickly at another quarterback who is somewhat undersized. He was never given a chance to succeed. It was overlooked because he wasn't the prototypical sized quarterback, and people kind of questioned what he could do in the NFL. Tom Brady is the guy I'm thinking of, and he was drafted in 2000 in the 6th round. And look at the guys that went ahead of him. They were all bigger and stronger than he was. Chad Pennington, Giovanni Carmazzi, Chris Redman, T. Martin, Mark Bolger, and the big one for me is Spurgeon Wynn. All of those guys, with the exception of Chad Pennington and Mark Bolger, who I believe both of them made Pro Bowls. I believe Chad Pennington made one.